Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening to pursue a question that I put in the House to the Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs on March 5th. And the issue deals with, very simply, the question of the integrity of Canada's ability to enforce sanctions against Iran when we are increasingly dealing with what we consider new markets or new trading partners, however you want to put it, but essentially allowing state-owned Communist Party enterprises owned by the government of China to become increasingly large investors in Canada. Some of these very same companies, not just the general concept of state-owned Chinese enterprises, but the very same companies are major investors in Iran. And in fact, the single largest customer for Iranian oil is Sinopec. Sinopec, as people may know, has been investing heavily in the oil sands. In fact, it purchased the 9% share that used to be ConocoPhillips' share of the oil sands. And at the same time that it's investing in the ConocoPhillips share was the share of Syncrude, so that it's a major investor now in Syncrude. But it's not the only company that deals with Iran as well as investing in Canada. I would mention, for instance, China National Offshore Oil Corporation, sometimes called CNOOC. CNOOC, the China National Offshore Oil Company, has completely purchased, or one of its subsidiaries has purchased, Long Lake Oil Sands Mine in Alberta. At the same time, it is doing a $16 billion investment with Tehran in the North Pars gas fields. That's not the only company. If you look at PetroChina, it has a 25-year deal with National Iran Gas Export Company, and at the same time that it was only 6 years into its 25-year deal with the Iranian National Gas Company, when that same company, PetroChina, purchased all of the mine at McKay River Oil Sands Project. Now, what does this mean for us in terms of our sanctions? The question I asked the Minister back March 5th was, in the light of the increased tensions around Iran, tensions around nuclear issues, the importance of sanctions cannot be overestimated. And I asked, in this light, are we not concerned that our new trading partner, Sinopec in China, which is the largest buyer of Iranian oil, is undermining the sanctions? The Minister's response, while interesting, did not relate to my question. And I hope this evening, as we pursue this matter, to perhaps get an answer to the question. I'd like to put into this discussion that we're having this evening that I'm not the only member of Parliament who's concerned about Chinese investments in Canada at the same time that these same Chinese companies are the major oil customers for Iran, undermining sanctions. And this is a quote from the Honourable Member for Mount Royal. It was reproduced in the Ottawa Citizen, and I quote, "To the extent that we've now got sanction-violating companies," I think that's a good term, sanction-violating companies here in Canada that are doing business in Iran, the implications are serious. They are very, very serious. And again, that was the Honourable Member for Mount Royal, who's got a very strong record in this area of working as hard as we all can to make sure that President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad understands that Canada is not his friend. We are friends of the people of Iran, but we're not his friend. How then do they perceive what's going on in global diplomacy when we're opening our arms? We're actually undermining environmental laws, and Bill C-38, with its destruction of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, appears to be in the interest of speeding things that Sinopec wants. How do we justify that, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Member for bringing this concern to the Parliament today, as has the member from Mount Royal. Mr. Speaker, Canada is deeply concerned by Iranian government's continued disrespect for human rights of its citizens, its destabilizing regional role, and its nuclear proliferation activities. Madam Speaker, let me address to the member by saying quite clearly that Iran very clearly knows that Canada is no friend of Iran. We have the largest, strongest sanctions against Iran, gone beyond what the Security Council has said. Most recently, on January 13, we expanded existing sanctions by adding 5 entities and individuals to our list of designated persons. But prior to that, Mr. Speaker, on November 21st, 2001, Canada implemented a number of strong measures against Iran under the Special Economic Measures Act. These expanded sanctions prohibit all financial transactions with Iran or any person in Iran, added individuals and entities to the list of designated persons, and expanded the list of goods prohibited for export. But, Mr. Speaker, the member has raised the question of China and this thing. Mr. Speaker, as a result of our effort of sanctions that we have put against Iran, there is no direct energy sector relations between Canada and Iran, Mr. Speaker. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, and I want to make this very clear, all Canadian sanctions against Iran were drafted as broadly as allowed under the Canadian law, Mr. Speaker. There is no power in the Canadian law to apply sanctions to non-Canadians outside Canada. Repeat, there is no power in the Canadian law to apply sanctions to non-Canadians outside Canada. However, the prohibitions apply to persons in Canada and Canadians abroad, and they apply to financial transactions carried out for the benefit of and on the direction of or order of any person in Iran. Mr. Speaker, let me also say that to the members' concern, that Canada's concern about the nuclear, not only nuclear activities, but also human rights violation has been long-standing. As a part of our ongoing efforts to promote respect for human rights in that country, Canada led the adoption of the resolution Situation of Human Rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran in the fall of 2011 session of the United Nations General Assembly. This marked the 9th consecutive year Canada led this initiative. The resolution was co-sponsored by 42 member states and supported by 89 in the vote, with only 30 members voting against it. This represented the largest margin of adoption since Canada assumed the lead on this resolution in 2003. Mr. Speaker, let me say I do join with the member on the opposite side of expressing the concern that she has expressed about the nuclear proliferation by Iran and the threat that Iran poses to the region. But we will be working with our international allies, and that includes China as well, Madam Speaker, to make sure that sanctions are applied and as much diplomatic pressure is put in Iran as we can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased that the Parliamentary Secretary believes there's a problem, but I'm astonished that he could put forward the notion that there's not an issue of concern when we have Sinopec, Sinopec, and PetroChina buying from Iran and investing in Canada at the same time, the same subsidiaries in and out of the same pockets. And when we talk about nuclear issues, we know that we've just approved a sale of yellowcake from Saskatchewan to China under terms that the U.S. finds too shaky to meet the terms of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We can't track yellowcake adequately under these new rules, and we could therefore be actually not only dealing with companies that actually buy the Iranian oil and prop up that regime, as China props up Syria as well. We could be in a situation where Canadian yellowcake makes its way into the Chinese nuclear program or even to the Iranian nuclear program. We can't track these sales. We've let the horse out of the barn without paying attention. In 2009, when we amended the Investment Canada Act, we should have put a clause in, as the experts recommended, for national security checks to be included. We have no protection. We're not paying attention.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, first and foremost, I want to make it very clear to the honourable member, we are concerned of what is happening in Iran, as she herself is concerned on the situation in Iran or this thing, Madam Speaker. However, our approach is to work with our allies. Of course, we are aware that China is one of the larger customers of Iran going back before the sanctions were put forward, and therefore diplomatically the pressure is coming on China from everyone to reduce the imports of oil into China. Madam Speaker, she keeps talking about China. It's India as well that is reducing its import from China. But this is working together under the diplomatic with all our allies to ensure that pressure is put forward on China and on other countries that are buying on the Iranian oil against them to come to the table and talk about the nuclear activities, Mr. Speaker. And right now, as we talk, the second stage of that conference is going to be taking place pretty soon, in which all 5 countries, including China, would be talking with the Iranians in reference to their nuclear activities, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.